So we're hitting record now. So Jessica, thank you so much
Awesome.
again for agreeing to meet with me today. Your restaurants are awesome. I can't wait to visit them. They look so exciting. If you wouldn't mind just kind of first starting, give me a little bit of background on yourself and just kind of how you got into the restaurant business. Just a little background on that would be awesome.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. So I was about 7 when I went vegetarian. I was living up in the Seattle area, and I had a strong kind of pull toward environmentalism and vegetarianism from the time I was very little, but I didn't really know what that meant because I was 7 years old. And so it wasn't something that really drove me in an academic way or toward the restaurant industry or anything else. It was just kind of working my way through school. And once I turned around 16 or 17, ending up in the restaurant business just by default. I wanted a job and I worked at Starbucks and then I worked at Claim Jumper. But this was never meant to be a career path for me. And I did have the opportunity when I was around 19 or 20 to work with Claim Jumper and move down to Carlsbad. So I came down from the Seattle area, and that's how I ended up in Carlsbad with a group of friends. And nobody really thought I would stay down here that long. I think my mom thought I was going to come back in a couple of months and, be back in Seattle where I belonged. But there was a lot about this neighborhood, this area that I really, really liked. And so I just kind of started settling in. I went to Cal State San Marcos. I started studying psychology, and I added an emphasis in biology because I found that I was really interested in healthcare, and some of the things that I had been focused on when I was younger, like health and a plant-based diet, started to kind of drive my interest as I was in college. And so, I think everybody can identify with being 20 and 21 and not really knowing what they were doing. So I was just kind of piecing my way through life, and I worked in restaurants continuously as a way to support myself while I was in school and while I was figuring out my path. I I studied the biology. I started focusing on neuroscience because that was what I was really interested in. And I thought I would either become a researcher or a physician. I interned at Palomar Health, which is a local hospital that had a really great leadership and healthcare internship program. And I was just kind of not floundering, but I couldn't really exactly identify what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to make a difference in people's health. I saw diet and, a plant-based diet definitely, but also just a healthy localized diet as a source of preventative medicine for people. And all of those things were kind of just wiggling around in my head. And as I was getting close to graduating from Cal State San Marcos, I met my now husband, David Waite, who was a local chef. And because he was currently leaving the restaurant he was a partner in, he was looking for some opportunities. And, as I was still kind of trying to figure out my path, we partnered up and decided to start a restaurant together. And it was a really kind of unconventional way to start a restaurant. We didn't have any financial backing. We didn't have a lot of experience. I had no business experience at this time. As I said, I'd been studying psychology and biology. And so then we had this opportunity to kind of do this little pop-up in a subletted space in Oceanside. And, circling back to my coming to San Diego, I liked San Diego. I liked Carlsbad, but something about me was really pulled toward Oceanside. And Oceanside has kind of a reputation of being a little bit grittier, but I felt a lot of potential here. And I was excited to have this opportunity to kind of do this project with somebody that I was really drawn to and passionate about, my partner, who shared a lot of my values and beliefs, and kind of start to create this business model, which again started as a pop-up. We called it Wrench and Rodent Sea Bass Pub, which again, another really strange name for a restaurant, but it was this idea that at that point we didn't have a lot to lose. We were just kind of scraping our bank accounts and making this work with whatever pennies we had. And we just started a sushi bar in a little restaurant space in South Oceanside. And it was a really interesting time because we didn't have a lot of resources. We were just bootstrapping in the truest sense of the words. So we just created this restaurant. We started sourcing from local farmers and local fishermen, and we just kind of created this menu that was really focused on local and sustainable seafood and veggies, and it hit for some reason. We had amazing ratings on Yelp and people started following us, and we didn't have a sign on the wall for a really long time at all. And we were just this underground, and this just 7 years ago, we just popped up. So that was kind of how we got started. And I was still kind of confused about what I wanted to do when I grew up, but we had this awesome opportunity to build this little space that people were excited about, that could feature local farmers and local fishermen. And we could also start to tell the story of what we believed in. And we could also start to give a little bit, because while we didn't have a lot of money, we were able to give to local nonprofits through, volunteering our time and our services. And we were able to start embedding ourselves in a community that we found to be really receptive to what we were trying to accomplish. That's a long-winded version of like how we ended up with Wrench and Rodent. I don't know if that is sensical to you at all.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome answer. Thank you. And I think that definitely, I'm a writer, so when I saw Sea Gastropub, I was like, oh my gosh, I love that, like, creative. It's so creative. I just thought that was great. So kind of seeing that fun play on words, I thought was fantastic. So I really like that about Wrench and Rodent. I thought that was a great way to kind of do something a little bit unorthodox, which I thought was awesome.
Thank you. And we use the word unorthodox a lot. And the word irreverent has also been used to describe David and his cooking techniques. And I think one thing about David is fun is he has a really traditional Japanese background, as far as he's not Japanese, but his career came from learning from chefs that, one chef that taught him was from Hokkaido. He worked at Ichiban in Santa Barbara, and then came down and worked at Cafe Japango in San Diego, and had the opportunity to learn from a lot of really talented chefs. So he has a really disciplined background, but he kind of adds in an irreverence that comes from just wanting to play with local flavors, be Baja influenced and locally influenced flavors. And so there was a really broad reception to what he was trying to create, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for it. And I think, if you want to captivate people, and if you want to draw interest to what you're doing, a lot of times all you have to do is do something newsworthy. All you have to do is get people excited. And he kept just creating and doing really interesting things, and people responded to that. And so that was kind of how we built our first business. And, again, I had no intention in staying in the restaurant business. I, thought either healthcare, or along the way I started becoming interested in business. But he wasn't really sure what I was doing, but I love the fact that we could create like insanely different food. We could tell the story of the relationships that went into creating that food, and that we could inspire other people to kind of, either, copy what we were doing because we thought it was good and impactful to source locally and use healthy products, or inspire them to eat in a way that might kind of change their mind or their attitude about what food is and how we source food. There was all these little things that started bubbling up in my head, like, hey, we can create a platform that influences change in our community and beyond. And so it was a really gradual process. There wasn't any one moment where we're like, this is our advocacy, or this is our business, this is our model. I didn't even know how to create a business plan at that point, but we just had this, we were getting this feedback, and we had this momentum, and we were excited to create and to share what we created. And that's how our first business was born.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that, as you mentioned too, I think part of kind of setting the standard for what a business can be is just by trying it and doing it. And obviously you guys have seen much success with that. And I think that you guys are really setting the precedent for businesses that can be sustainable and green, but also be really good. So I really appreciate that, because that's something that's important to me as well. So kind of diving a little bit more into the plot, which is your newest restaurant, is how has it feel to have a restaurant that's cherished by people that's also good for the environment? I think, in my opinion, personally, it's a win-win, because it's good for the environment, it's good for your consumers, and it's really interesting to see that you can do something that's successful and that's profitable, but also do it in the way that's ethical and that's sustainable. I think that there's a little bit of a mindset that you can't have a business that's sustainable and profitable, but I've seen a lot of newer businesses come out where everything's very green, and they're still doing just as well as if they were not doing green things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's just a kind of an old school mentality that, you can only have profit or environmental impact, or you can only have profit or the right thing, and that's something we need to kind of scrape from our mindsets as business owners or business leaders. And, I think the plot came at a time while I was at Pepperdine, and I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. And I wasn't certain that restaurants were it, but I was at a conference on sustainability. It's the California Resource and Recovery Association. And David was a keynote speaker, and I was supposed to be, or it had been asked to be a speaker with him, but I'm too afraid. It was like 800 people. And so he spoke, but I got to attend all of the lecture series, and I got to listen to all of these people talking about all of the things they were doing all over the world in sustainability, and these business models that were happening, and things that were being created. And I started just thinking about it. And this again was while I was in business school, so I had a lot to noodle on. But I started thinking about what it would look like to do the most idealistic possible business. Like, if we were going to set all pragmatism aside, like, what would my business model look like? And so that's the first time I thought, and I sat down and, at lunch wrote my first business plan for the plot. And this was in 2017. So it does take a while, I think, to kind of find your way when you have a new concept, or it can. But having those thoughts and then starting to talk to people about it. And I had friends and advisors that I really trust who said, that's crazy. You can't do a zero waste restaurant. It's going to be too expensive. And they just look at me and they say that like it's law or like it's a rule, like that's too expensive, that won't work. And I think at that point, because I wasn't married to the idea of staying in this industry, I didn't really have any expectations of myself. I was like, why can't we do this? Why can't we do the most idealistic thing possible? And so that kind of started the journey, and David and I just started playing with the idea of what this would look like. And I think bringing the plant-based, I mean, obviously I've been plant-based for a very long time, but I have businesses that are not plant-based. But the idea of bringing plants or, a vegan menu into this restaurant space, it really helps with the sustainability. It helps with the components of packaging. And there's a lot of things, and just the overall mission of sustainability, there's a lot that plant-based menu contributes to. So that was something that was pretty easy for us to decide on. And plus, David just loves playing with plants. He's a creative chef, and this idea of creating a menu that was like an omnivore's plant-based menu was really appealing to him. So he started the R&D side of things, and I started trying to create the model for it. And one thing we wanted to do from the start was make this a business that didn't really compromise. And we didn't want to compromise our ideals. And we also didn't want to compromise the experience for the guests. And I think there's a lot of plant-based restaurants over time that have been a little bit fringe. They feel a little bit like, different in the sense that not everyone would feel comfortable there. And we really wanted to create a restaurant space where, any, average person off the street could walk in and be like, this is a great restaurant. I want to eat here. I enjoy bringing my kids here. I enjoy the atmosphere. Oh, wait, it happens to have a plant-based menu, and not something that people only seek out because of the style of the food. So all of that kind of started to come together, and over really a year or so, we had the opportunity. The city called us to look at one space that they wanted us to go into, just because we're known as, people who do good business in Oceanside. And then that space didn't end up working out for us. We found another location, and we were able to build the plot over time. But to answer your question, which now I've wandered off, meandered. But I think really to wind down to what it feels like to have this kind of a restaurant, it feels really good to know that we're doing business that is good business. It's good for the people who work for us. It's profitable for investors, or, will be once we get past this whole COVID thing, which we can touch on. But then also it's really that triple bottom line. Like it's benefiting all stakeholders. It's benefiting our, the environment. It's definitely benefiting the animals that are not ending up on the plate, but then it's benefiting our consumers too, because they're eating food that's really health forward. So they don't have to compromise. They can have an incredible meal. So I don't, this idea of making a business that's win-win-win, I love it. I think it's great. And the idea that we could scale that business, we can inspire other business owners to do something similar. And if we do more, then we have more impact. That's incredibly exciting to me.
Right. And I completely agree. So I think it's great that you guys, again, are kind of setting the precedent for not even just the food industry, but really industries in general, that, it is possible to do complete sustainability. You just have to kind of get down a little bit dirtier, for lack of a better word, and figure out, you know, how to do it, because I know that you can. It sometimes takes a little bit more work. So I
Yeah, and
appreciate
that's
that
funny.
answer.
No, I have to tell you when you say dirtier, because when people talk about zero waste, they might think it's, oh, it's nice and it's fluffy and it's great. Sometimes when you don't have solutions that have already been provided for you, you literally have to get dirty. And we have this composting solution that we found for our restaurants, and it's bokashi composting, because now the city's putting infrastructure in for composting. But when you say you're a zero waste restaurant, you have to make sure that there's a higher value use for every single thing. And our definition of zero waste was nothing's destined for landfill. So because we don't have an infrastructure in place for composting, we had to use a solution, a temporary solution, which is these bokashi compost buckets, which we are bringing our food scraps out to the farm. And you put this grain called bokashi that helps to start processing the food scraps. But a lot of the times it was me putting them in the back of my Prius and actually driving them out to the farm, and they're stinky. So when you say dirty, like sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves, and you're the only one as the business owner who ends up doing that stuff. So it's definitely a journey in finding solutions.
Right, right. And I think that's great, because, you know, it's easier said than done, but when you actually do it and it's successful, I think that it shows you that anyone can do it. You just have to be willing to roll up your sleeves, as you said.
Exactly.
Kind of moving into the next question, you kind of covered this a little bit, but how did attending Graziadio influence some of your business decisions when you were building the plot, when you guys were kind of conceptualizing what you wanted it to be? What influence did Graziadio play into the development of the plot?
It's funny because I think the answer to this question comes in different layers. And I was thinking today about how I ended up at Graziadio in the first place. And there was a point in the beginning of David and my relationship when we were driving up through Malibu, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life, and I was a little scared. And we somehow managed to drive by the base of the school of Pepperdine, the Malibu campus. And I looked up and I saw this beautiful campus, and I thought, okay, well, in a different life, had I done things differently, that's where I would have ended up. Like, I love this school. I've done research on it. It was, it's a strong value-based school. It to me was the pinnacle of what I would have wanted to achieve had I done things a little differently. And so much later, when I had the opportunity to start looking for business school programs, I found this online program through Pepperdine, and it was like a no-brainer for me, because it was just like that. I'd had that moment previously in my life, and now all of a sudden I did have the opportunity to go back and invest in my future through Pepperdine. And it was really a meaningful kind of moment of like, okay, this is things, I'd set that intention. So that was kind of how I ended up at Graziadio. And I think that the kind of the overall mission of the school being a strong value-based school really influenced my kind of decision to focus intently on business ethics and having an impact through business. And so I think the ethics and the impact go hand in hand, knowing that I'm going to be making decisions that are ethical business decisions in a way that I'm not going to compromise in any relationship. I'm not going to make a decision that might value my business economically, but might actually impact the environment in a negative way. I'm not going to do something that might, increase our shareholder value down the line, but might put our employees at risk or might compromise their experience and their ability to contribute. So I think really, to answer your question about Graziadio and my business, it was just like, this is a school that gave me the education I needed. It kind of helped to clarify a lot of things that I'd learned along the way, but helped me really understand. It gave me the confidence to sit at a broader table with people and know that I had an understanding about business that was valid and real. There was a lot of things that came from my business school education, but there was also this commitment that I was choosing a school that aligned with my belief system, and it made me even more strong in my convictions.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. That's a good answer. And I think, again, it kind of it's nice to hear that our education is influencing things, because sometimes, I feel like schools can teach things, but you don't always see them actually in action. So I think it's awesome that you've actually been able to apply that stuff.
Yeah, there's unlimited amounts that I learned from that program. And, I think one thing that was really fun and interesting was just studying different businesses and different business models. And then also I feel like there's this like the second lesson of business school. It's like you get all the school, you get the business law, you get everything else, but then you get this experience of working with teams so much. And then the online program, it was like I don't know how, I only took a couple brick and mortar classes, but the online version, it was like every single class I had a team that I worked with for the entire and for somebody who's used to being in a position, I think in a leadership position, that was the hardest part, is all of a sudden being in a group in which we were all equals and we all had to get to an end goal together. And so that was probably one of the most challenging and most rewarding parts of the program for me, was just that team dynamic.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine what it's like being the boss and then all of a sudden not really being the boss anymore.
I mean, I remember one of my first classes, somebody called me passive aggressive. And I was like, I'm not a passive aggressive person. I'm aggressive. So it was just like, this dynamic, but working through it. But I think that was really probably one of the most, again, like meaningful parts of it, is just learning those lessons, learning how to work with other people, how to navigate those conflicts, like whatever might arise, and how to get to an end result that was really meaningful for everyone in the group. So it was really awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So moving on, I know that we're still unfortunately in the midst of this, but what have been some significant takeaways that you and your husband have learned from running a business during COVID-19? I know that for some people it's been a very unfortunate experience. For others, it's been kind of a good learning experience, and then there's some that are in between. What's it been like for you guys, and have you had any takeaways thus far of how to run a business during COVID-19? I know that there was mention of like the Plot Express that you guys have been working on, but what challenges have you guys seen, and has there been any takeaways that you would say are a little bit positive?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, we had just finished building the plot. I'd gone through a year of intense fundraising. One thing I never learned about fundraising, what I feel like nobody really tells you, is that it's a lot harder than it sounds. And there's a lot of kind of back and forth, and you have to do it once and then do it again and then do it again. And it was tough. It was a tough year. And then we finally got to the point where we were open, and it was phenomenal. The response that we got to the plot was just above and beyond any dream that I could have had for this new business. And so to have COVID happen, so a month in after we just opened, it was a little bit crushing. And so I think the first lesson that I took from it was really just take a pause, kind of deal with the feelings of having to furlough your entire staff, having to pivot your business model so soon after we had just opened. That was scary, and it was sad, and it was sad to close the doors of our other restaurants too, even though it was just temporary. So I think, the first thing I had to do was learn how to just like be okay with not being okay with that, and take a pause and really start to kind of look at the challenges we are facing, look at the opportunities too, because it's okay to say like, this is a crisis, but with this crisis, there can be opportunities. But that pause was really important to us. We didn't just start announcing to the public what we were going to do next right away. We took some time and we sat, and then we used the plot as kind of a test model for our other restaurants too, because it's from the perspective of shutting down a restaurant and then reopening, because it's all plant-based, there was a lot less potential for loss. So, those are kind of more intricate business side. That's the side of the business that might be, vary from company to company. But I think the big picture was pause and then pivot and be decisive. And I saw a lot of waffling, and it's not by any fault of any business, because it was an incredibly challenging time, but messages were really inconsistent. And we just tried to have a consistent message the entire time. And yes, we had to respond to things as they were changing, but really just, take that opportunity to communicate clearly and create consistency for our customers. One thing we saw that was really important was just the value of having a strong local following and a strong community, because we got so much support from our local community, and that was invaluable. But I think just being creative, being flexible, having a sense of humor and understanding that we were going to do the best we possibly could, and we had no idea what was going to happen, and that was scary. But to have faith too, that things were going to work out the way they were meant to work out. And that's one thing that, I think as an entrepreneur, you just have to have in your heart, or you have to understand and really firmly believe, is that, things are going to get thrown at you all the time. And COVID was a monster, is still a monster. We're still dealing with it. But, as you move through your entrepreneurial journey, it's, things do not go the way you plan. And so to just be able to be flexible, be responsive, and have faith that things are going to end up the way they're meant to end up. If you stay the course and just stay committed to providing good business, I think that was probably the biggest lesson.
Yeah, and that's great. I think that in my opinion, COVID-19 has just really shown you, like, life in general, like, things get thrown at you and you just kind of have to be like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but you just kind of work through it. And I think as you learn from it and you grow from it, it really sets you up to be strong in the future. I think that after this year, everyone on earth is going to be like, I can handle anything now, because COVID's really just been, as you said, a monster.
Well, that's one thing that I feel like as a small business owner, you kind of learn anyway. Like after, 5 years of bootstrapping Rich and Rodent, and, now it's been 7, but, about 5 years in, and sleepless nights and feeling like I was doing everything wrong all the time and not knowing how to do it right, you get to this point where you feel like you can almost handle anything. And so I think that's being a small business owner and being an entrepreneur is like, things get thrown at you and you just figure out how to deal with them. And you don't always have all the answers, but you build a team around you that can support you, mentors and friends and a community, and you're not doing it on your own at all. There's a lot of people out there that will have our back, and so I think, but just knowing that you can find those solutions are there, and and that kind of transfers over to building a new business that's based on your morals or your ideals, or like the plot, yeah, so there's a lot of things in the business community, in the corporate world, that aren't great right now, that can be better for the environment, for human health, for animal health. But that does not mean there's not solutions. So we can take this lesson, this small business owner lessons and this COVID lesson, and we can say, like, we have the solutions within us. They're with us and with the teams we built around us. We just have to be ready to dig in and find them.
Right. And I think that's great advice. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on to the next question. This is kind of one that I personally am curious about, because I've talked about with my significant other. We want to, at some point, maybe do a way down the road, because he's actually currently a physician. He's in school to be a physician's assistant, but we're thinking about maybe doing like a fully sustainable coffee shop. How has it been building a successful business with your significant other, and what advice do you have for those looking to build a business with their partners? I know that some people are very on the fence about it. They're saying, sometimes it can kind of make you guys stronger, or other times it can kind of drive you guys apart. So what has your experience been like, and what advice do you have for those looking to start a business with their significant other?
It's a journey. And I think first and foremost, just know yourself and know your boundaries. And if it gets to a point where it's impacting your relationship in a way that is not, that doesn't feel good, then take a step back and re-examine. But I think that being passionate about something else other than your significant other is really important to a relationship, right? And so two people in a relationship that are passionate about something, and that happens to be the same thing, and you guys can run parallel, it empowers each individual in the relationship, and it also creates a strong kind of law of attraction, because you're both focused intently on accomplishing something, and those things align, and it's really powerful. And it's a lot of fun. And it, can also be really, really hard. And, we've had a lot of fights. And one thing we realized, though, is we fight about the business. We don't fight with each other. We have, we go on vacation and we're great. We love each other. We have a blast. But then we come home and we fight about something. But one thing we also realize is a lot of times we're fighting on different sides, but for the same purpose, which is for the good of the business. So I think that's one thing too, is if you both have the same passions and values and beliefs, and you both want to accomplish the same things, sometimes you'll vary on how to get there, but those fights happen. And a lot of times we find ourselves teasing things out in a way that really ends up being, better for the business as a whole. Like we get to a place that's better than had we not had the big blowout fight. But it's challenging. I think everybody kind of has to do it on their own way and kind of learn their own lessons. But it's like anything in life. Like if you are honest with yourself, if you take that moment to pause and really examine what your motives are, why you're pushing for what you're pushing, understand that sometimes you might not want to push, and you might just kind of want to go with the flow a little bit for a minute. Like, I think in a relationship and just as a business leader in general, like, those are all important lessons.
Right. And I think, again, I think that's good advice. I think, especially with being passionate about something else other than your significant other, I think kind of can separate the two, which I think is great. And then moving kind of into the last question here for our viewers and our followers, what advice do you have for business owners that may be struggling during this global pandemic? I think that, for those that are paying attention to business and business trends, some businesses have really flourished from COVID-19 because they've been able to really utilize their model, but then others have been in a little bit more of a difficult position. What advice do you have for business owners, especially small business owners, on how to weather this pandemic?
Got it. It's really that's a hard question, because I think we're all being stripped away and finding these versions of ourselves that we never really even thought we needed to find, which is just having more and more resilience. And I think if we can, like I said, find ways to be responsive, pivot, and take advantage of any opportunity that comes our way. I don't think that it has to be, I think people sometimes look at business owners and think, oh, they must just be out for the money, or they might, this and that, but it's not. When you're trying to save your business, it's okay to take advantage of every opportunity that you see and just be creative. I think that in the long run, that resilience will make us all stronger. I think there's something about COVID that brought us to our knees in a way that we realized that, there's no blame anymore. And it was almost like a feeling of relief, like, of all the things we've been challenged by, had we failed as business owners, it would have been like our fault. At this point, like, nobody can place any blame for a business owner or a company that cannot survive through this crisis. So it almost takes a level of, feelings of guilt or stress away, and then you just realize, like, do what you have to do and be creative and pivot your business model and ask for help. And but again, this is all going to be specific to each individual business. Restaurants had it really hard. There's a lot of things about this pandemic that, based on your location or your following or the style of food you serve, you might just not survive. And I think at the end of the day, like, we just have to be okay with doing our very, very best, using every resource we have, and being okay with the outcome. My dad always says, let go of the outcome. And I think that's interesting advice, because we just focus on doing the very best we can with every resource we have. And whatever happens, we're going to have to be okay with that.
Right. And I think that's good advice. And I think that's also realistic advice as well, because I think that sometimes it can be hard to give advice without it sounding like a little bit too unrealistic. So I really appreciate that advice. Well, Jessica, thank you so much again for agreeing to meet with me today. I really appreciate all the time that you've taken. And I think that our viewers and our students are really going to be inspired by you. And I think that also I'm excited to see kind of what the future of the restaurant businesses look like, hopefully modeling themselves after you, because you've really proven that you can have a green business and also have a business that tastes just as good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I know, I agree. I feel like we can continue to raise the bar for, cuisine as a whole, as far as how we source and how we kind of run our business. But then also we can raise the bar for plant-based food too, and understand that there doesn't have to be any compromise when you're making decisions for your health and for the environmental health. Like, it's okay. It can still be delicious.
Right. Well, thank you so much again, Jessica, and I hope that you have a great day.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.